getting started. Welcome to lesson 1. Let's get right into setting up our canvas in Procreate. Now, this is an extremely important part of the process that can easily be overlooked, but it will set us up for success from the very beginning. Now, for your future paintings, I want you to think about what it is that your painting will be used for. Maybe it's a large-scale print, or a sticker, or a tote bag, or a poster. This will help you decide the size that you need to set for your piece. So let's go ahead and open up Procreate. Basic tools. Let's start with setting up our canvas for Procreate. Now, this is a super important step, and I will show you why, because if you don't do this properly and you give yourself a low resolution image and you do this beautiful painting, it can turn out looking really pixelated and not great, and you can't change it once it's done. So to start, we're gonna hit that plus sign button up at the top right corner here. And there's already some preset sizes for us to choose from. I'm gonna do a custom size just to show you how to do it and give you a little bit more control, especially if you have an idea of what you wanna use this for, whether it's a specific size print or you wanna make stickers or a tote bag. The possibilities are endless. So to do that, there's another little plus sign right next to where it says New Canvas, and it's gonna open this little window for us. I like to work in inches just because that's how my brain operates. I'm gonna put in 8 by 10 here. This is a standard size I go to. 11 by 17 is another option. And really the most important player here is the DPI, and that stands for dots per inch. So think of an inch of your painting and everything's made up of little pixels. So the more dots that you have in that inch, the more detail you're gonna see, and the less it's going to be more pixelated. So sometimes you'll see 72 DPI, and that's really great for web because you're not zooming in on everything and you're looking at it probably from like a small scale from your computer. But when you're creating art and you want to print it and put it places, 72 is not a good option. I always tell my students automatically always do 300. Sometimes I'll do 350 just to be safe. And that'll give me a little wiggle room if I want to make my image a little bit bigger than what I initially had. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Here is an example of one of my paintings and the two versions, one in 72 DPI and the other in the original 300 DPI. And right off the bat, you can really see a difference in the sharpness. This one just looks like it has like a blur filter on. This one's a lot sharper. I can see the brush strokes. And it's really apparent when you zoom in. So I'm going to zoom in on the pixelated one. This is 72. I can barely see those brush marks. Everything is just fuzzy. And you can see those pixels right here. It's just not good. And if I was going to print this out, it would just look super low quality. And a lot of my hard work would have gone to waste. Compared to the 300 DPI, it looks much more professional. It looks high quality. You can really see all of those brush strokes that I was using, those charcoal brushes and the cloud texture. You can see a lot more detail when you're zooming in on the 300 DPI. So that's why I'm stressing it is so important in the beginning, because you can always make something smaller, but you can't make it bigger because the quality will dilute and not look good. So you just never know what you will be using something for and what you'll need to print it at. So it's always safer to just go bigger and always minimum 300 DPI. So for this, where it says maximum layers, Procreate can only have a capacity for so many layers just for space issues. So the bigger piece you do, the smaller the layers are going to be. So let's say I want my canvas to be 20 by 15. We're going to have now a maximum layers of 20 as opposed to 80. And that's fine. Honestly, you shouldn't be using a ton of layers anyways. And if I kept all of the layers that I use in my paintings, I'd probably have like 150. But as I'm painting, I'll consolidate those layers just so I don't get overwhelmed if I want to turn one off, or if there's some weird mark somewhere and I have to go through every single layer to find which one it is. So this kind of keeps me in check to make sure I'm not going to that limit. So that part doesn't bother me. So let's start with just 11 by 17, 300 DPI. We have a max of 35 layers. Let's create that canvas. And I'm just going to rotate it horizontally just for teaching purposes. And to rotate, you just use your 2 fingers and just move it to where you want it to be. And to zoom, we'll just use our 2 fingers again and zoom out. So it makes it really versatile for you to kind of play around with and move while you're painting, which I really, really love. Let's go through some basic tools together. I'm not going to go into every single tool right now, just because there's a lot of great videos that really, really dive into the depths of every tool and its capabilities. This video is more so of just kind of getting you started and getting you comfortable and making sure your workflow is effective so you're not spending and wasting times and making mistakes. So let's get into the brush tool. We'll start there. It's one of the most important tools we'll need. And the brush tool is right up here. Select that. Now we have our brush. And if we want to change that brush, we'll just tap that again and it'll bring up our brush library. So we can go around to the different categories, find a brush that suits our needs. Some are more like wet brushes. So if we want to do like an oil painting brush, it already starts kind of blending for us, which is really cool. I really gravitate towards brushes with texture or these wet paint brushes because it looks like traditional media. And sometimes when I'm painting, I notice I get super airbrushy. And for my style, I really want to bring some more texture into that. So I try to make myself use a lot of these textured brushes, and we'll get into more of that soon. Next, we'll do a blending brush. So that's right next to the brush tool. Select that. And then again, if you want to select a different blender, just double tap there and we can select any blender we want. It'll start blending for us. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Same with the eraser here. Double tap, bring up a new brush for us. There we go. And on the left here is these 2 panels right here. This is for size. We can change the size of our eraser. We can also change the opacity. So we can bring that down and it gives you a little preview in this window right here of the opacity. So we'll do that and there we go. I love playing with opacity. It does a lot of the work for you. I actually really don't use the blending tool ever in my work, yet I still have a very blended appearance just because it's the way I work. And I'm going to give you a couple different options of blending as well, so you can play around and feel which one is working for you the best. Next, we have our layer panel right here. I love layers so much. Here, I'm going to add a little blob here for my next demonstration. Okay, so on our first layer, we have this nice little blue blob going on here. And I like to explain layers to students as you're painting on a transparent piece of paper. So you can see here we have our blue blob and behind it is our transparent piece of paper and our white background. So we can turn that white background off and you can see that transparent piece of paper. If we want to add another transparent piece of paper on top of our first layer, do the plus sign here. I'm going to take a different color. Let's do red. I'm going to paint on top of this. And this is the part of digital I love because if you're actually traditionally painting with acrylic and you do red on top of blue, you can't take that off. It is there. It is really essentially like you're painting on one layer when you're traditionally painting. But here, if I want to play around with and move that, I can turn that layer on and off in the layer panel with this little check mark right here. It's essentially like you're taking off that piece of paper and putting it back on. Another thing you can do is change the opacity of the layer itself. So we went over opacity with brushes and we can do the same thing with the layer panel. So we're going to take our 2 fingers again and just tap on this layer. And now it'll bring up the opacity here. And you just take your 1 finger and just drag this down and the entire layer, everything on it will be opaque or not opaque, depending on what you want to do. So I love this option just because it gives you so much control on how much you want to show through. So what it's essentially doing is blending this into the blue behind it, which is really cool. And I do a lot of my painting in this way, and just gives me a lot of control to kind of play around with and like see how things are looking instead of just going in automatically with an opaque brush and then not sure if I like it or not. So again, sometimes I'll just go in with a really, really bright opaque color like this and then turn it down. You can do a lot of experimenting, which is really fun and can give you a lot of creative control over what you want your piece to look like. Instead of relying on certain brushes, you can, make your own workflow, which is awesome. So doing this technique, it gives you a lot of creative control to decide how much you want that red to show, how much you want the blue to show. So you can turn that blue down, just have a nice like light blue background. And yeah, I really love this option, and it's a way that I paint. I'm going to show you how to actually blend with this once we get into blending, which is right now.
Assignment: familiarize yourself with these basic Procreate tools.